Daisy and the Trouble with Coconuts by Cass Gray. To Oliver Edward Andrews. Chapter 1. The trouble with coconuts is they are the worst type of nuts in the whole wide world. If I was a monkey living in a jungle that was totally made up of coconut trees, and one of the coconuts on one of the trees asked me to be their friend, then there is absolutely no way that I would say yes. I'd rather be friends with Jack Beachwhistle, who's the worst boy on earth, than be friends with a coconut. If you ask me, coconuts shouldn't be allowed in a fun fair. If you double ask me, they shouldn't even be allowed to grow. Coconuts are too big. Coconuts are too hairy. Plus, if you try to win one, they just get you into trouble. Which isn't my fault. Chapter 2. I was really excited when I heard that the fun fair was coming to town. Gabby was the first person at school to tell me. Nishta Bagwat was second. Daniel McNichol was third. Fiona Tucker was fourth, I think. Or it might have been Colin Kettle, I'm not sure. So I'll call it a draw. Everyone in the playground was really excited about the fun fair. Trouble is, everyone was still really excited when we went into class too. Being excited about fun fairs in class is against school rules. Because it makes you forget your times tables. And it makes you fidget. The trouble with fidgeting is it makes your chair squeak. The trouble with chairs squeaking is it makes your teacher look right at you. Which is a bit of a problem if you've just said 6 sevens are 93. If you've just told your teacher that 6 sevens are 93, you really want her to ask someone else the next sum. Trouble is, when Mrs. Peters heard my chair squeak again, she asked me 2 sums in a row. Which is probably against the law. But there was no one around to stop her. The trouble with 9 times 8 is it's an even harder sum to do than 6 times 7. Especially if there's a fun fair coming to town. If there's a fun fair coming to town, all sums turn into really hard sums because your brain can't stop thinking about more important things. Like fun fairs. The trouble with thinking about fun fairs during mental arithmetic is the 9s sound a bit like 5s and the 8s get muddled up with 4s. Which is why I said that the answer to 9 times 8 was 20. Which isn't the right answer either. When Mrs. Peters said it wasn't even close, everyone in my class started looking at me. Which made me go all hot. The trouble with going all hot in class is it makes your brain shrink. Which means it's even harder to do sums in your head. Luckily for me, Jack Beachwhistle fell off his chair just before I was going to change my mind to 76. Which was a good job really. Because 76 wasn't the right answer either. Thank goodness Jack did fall off his chair, because everyone was looking at him now, instead of me. Including Mrs. Peters. Except no one could see him. Because he hadn't got back up off the floor. When Fiona Tucker looked down by her feet and told us that Jack was dead on the floor, Mrs. Peters forgot about 9 times 8 altogether. She ran to the back of the class where Fiona and Jack sit and looked under the desk to see if it was true. But it wasn't. Jack Beachwhistle wasn't even slightly dead. He was just pretending. That's the trouble with Jack Beachwhistle. He is 5 trillion badly behaved. The trouble with pretending you're dead in class is Mrs. Peters doesn't think it's a very funny thing to do. Everyone else in class thought it was funny, but Mrs. Peters is a teacher. Which means she's had her funny bones taken out and replaced with crossbones. Her crossbones got even crosser when she noticed that Jack had been drawing fun fair pictures all over his maths book. Then she got even crosser than crosser when she noticed that Fiona Tucker had been drawing fun fair pictures too. It wasn't just Jack and Fiona either. Nishta had drawn a big wheel on the back of her hand, Harry Bayless had done a candy floss tattoo on his arm, and David Alexander had drawn a rifle range with exploding ducks right across the top of his school bag. No wonder no one could get their sums right. Luckily, I'd never been to a fun fair before, so I didn't know what kind of pictures to draw. But I still got told off for squeaking. Mrs. Peters told us that fidgeting and drawing funfair pictures in mental arithmetic was completely unacceptable behavior. She said that if Pythagoras had spent all his time fidgeting and drawing candy floss tattoos on his arms, then mathematics would still be in the dark ages. She said that from now on we must start concentrating on the important things in life. Then she said we had to stay in at break time to catch up on our sums. Plus we got banned from even thinking about fun fairs for the rest of the day. But I still did. Only in secret and without fidgeting. Chapter 3. The trouble with funfair posters is when a fun fair comes to town, they stick them everywhere. When me and Mum went into town after school, I saw funfair posters stuck on the fence down by the roundabout. There were funfair posters stuck on the window of an empty shop in the high street. There were even bits of a funfair poster stuck on the back of a lorry parked outside the baker's. It was so exciting! It got even more exciting when Mum told me that Nanny and Grampy had phoned while I was at school and offered to take me to the fun fair on Saturday afternoon. I didn't even know that my Nanny and Grampy liked fun fairs. I thought they were far too old to like fun things. Mum said that just because people are over the age of 60 it doesn't mean they should give up the will to live. She said that, for a lot of people, retirement is the most enjoyable time of life. She said that when you're Nanny and Grampy's age you can do anything you want, anytime you want to. Which is a good job really, because Mum would never have taken me to a fun fair. Because Mum doesn't like fun fairs at all. Whenever the fun fair has come to town before, my mum has always pulled a grumpy face. As far as she is concerned, fun fairs are a complete waste of money. Plus she says the games at a fun fair are too expensive and the rides spin you round so much they make you sick. Sometimes I think my mum should have been a teacher. Luckily for me, Mum wasn't invited. I reckon Nanny and Grampy had probably taken Mum to a fun fair when she was a little girl and had decided never to do it again. Fun fairs are no fun at all if you take the wrong sort of children. Luckily for Nanny and Grampy, was exactly the right sort of child to take to a fun fair. I didn't mind if the rides were too expensive because Nanny and Grampy would be paying. I didn't even mind if the rides made me feel sick, because at least I'd be having brilliant fun at the same time. Plus I was absolutely sure I wasn't going to be sick anyway. When I spoke to Grampy on the phone on Friday, he sounded even more excited about the fun fair than me. He asked me if LD ever been in a bumper car, and I said I hadn't. He asked me if I'd ever been down a helter-skelter, and I said I hadn't. He asked me if LD ever been on a waltzer, and I said I hadn't. He asked me if LD ever eaten a toffee apple, and I said I had. But I hadn't. Only I said I had because it was getting a bit embarrassing. And anyway, I had eaten an apple before. And I had eaten a toffee before. Only not at the same time. Which is almost the same thing. Kind of. Anyway, Grampy said that there were two things that we absolutely must do while we were at the fun fair on Saturday. Number 1, we must win a goldfish. Number 2, we must win a coconut. I'd never won a goldfish or a coconut before, so you can imagine how excited I was now. When Nanny came on the phone, she said that they would pick me up in the car at 12 o'clock on Saturday and would bring me back at 4. Which, if you're any good at mental arithmetic, adds up to 4 fabulous fun-filled hours. Maybe staying in at break time did help me with my sums after all. Chapter 4. The trouble with normal breakfasts is they can be a bit boring. So when I woke up on Saturday, I decided that instead of having a normal breakfast, I would have a special funfair one. Funfair breakfasts are much more fun. In fact, they're so much fun, you don't even need to put sugar on them. To have a funfair breakfast, all you need is 2 Weetabixes and some honey nut loops. Oh, and a biggish carton of milk with quite a latte-ish amount of milk in. Here are my instructions on how to make Daisy's special funfair breakfast. First of all, take the first Weetabix and lay it flat on the bottom of your bowl. Then wedge the second Weetabix up against it like a slide. The first Weetabix helps the second Weetabix stay in position. Next, cover the flat Weetabix with milk. Not too much, just enough to make the milk look like a swamp. Then, take a honey nut loop in your fingers, place it at the top of the slide, count down from 3 to 1, let go of the honey nut loop and let it roll down the slide into the swamp. As soon as the loop touches the side of your bowl, you can grab it out with your fingers and eat it. How much fun is that? The more honey nut loops you roll down the slide, the more you get to eat. It's simple! Plus, once you've run out of honey nut loops, you can eat the slide while it's still crunchy and the mushy bottom of the swamp afterwards. Mom said I could have funfair breakfasts every day if it meant I was going to eat that much breakfast for breakfast. I said I would if I could go to a funfair every day too. But she said I couldn't. So I said I probably wouldn't. Chapter 5. It was a really hot day on Saturday, so getting dressed after breakfast took hardly any time at all. I was sure the funfair would be full of bright colors, so I decided to wear my brand new orange shorts plus my brightest colored t-shirt and socks. Mom said I looked a bit clashy, but I didn't care. I think orange, purple and green go really well together. Once I was dressed, I went into the lounge to practice my screaming. Gabby had told me that some of the rides at a funfair are so good, you can't stop screaming from the moment you get on. The trouble with practicing screaming is I'm too good at it. Mum said that if I wanted to practice my screaming I should go and do it outside in the garden. But after about 5 screams our neighbor Mrs. Pike told me that I should practice in the shed. With the door shut. So I did. Except Tiptoes was asleep in the wheelbarrow. The trouble with screaming when Tiptoes is asleep in the wheelbarrow is it doesn't just wake him up, it makes him go totally loopy. I mean, 1 minute he was curled up in the wheelbarrow, the next minute he was halfway up the wall, then the other wall and then almost across the ceiling. I wouldn't have screamed if LD known he was there, but it was so dark in the shed there was no way I could see a cat curled up in the shadows. That's the trouble with cats. If they wore fluorescent pajamas when they went to sleep, they'd be much easier to see. By the time I'd opened the shed door to let Tiptoes out, he'd knocked over the flower pots, the rake, the watering can, the spade, the fork, plus all the seed packets that were on the highest up shelf. And guess who had to pick them all up? It wasn't Tiptoes. It was me. If you ask me, if a cat wants to curl up and go to sleep in a wheelbarrow, he should get his own shed to sleep in. And his own wheelbarrow. Or at least wear glow-in-the-dark pajamas. Or learn to snore loudly. It was only when I was stretching up high to put the seed packets back that I suddenly forgave Tiptoes for everything. Because all of my really high-up stretching and stretching suddenly reminded me of something really important that Dylan had told me at school. If you're going to go to a funfair, you need to wear your highest shoes. Chapter 6. Dylan is the coolest boy I know. He's 2 years older than me, which means he's really experienced. Plus he lives 2 doors away from me in a house with a 3-chime doorbell. And he's got a pet snake called Shooter. How cool is that? At first, when Dylan told me that I needed to wear my highest shoes to the funfair on Saturday, I thought he was joking. But Dylan is far too cool to do jokes. Sometimes Dylan is too cool to even smile. According to Dylan, some of the rides at a funfair are so dangerous and so death-defying, you have to be over 140 centimeters to go on them. Trouble is, I'm only 134 centimeters tall. The trouble with being 134 centimeters tall is that if you want to go on all the rides, you need to find an extra 6 centimeters from somewhere. Trouble is, I didn't really know where to look. When I asked my mom on Saturday morning what I needed to eat if I wanted to grow 6 centimeters in 2 hours, she wasn't very helpful at all. You could try eating some giraffe burgers, she laughed. I don't know why she was laughing because it wasn't a very funny thing to say at all. Plus I couldn't try eating giraffe burgers because we don't have any giraffe burgers in our freezer. We don't even have any cow burgers in our freezer anymore, because my new super health-conscious mom has suddenly decided that things that taste really nice like burgers aren't very good for me. Or chicken nuggets. According to my mom, it's time I started putting some healthier things inside me. Like fish without breadcrumbs and broccoli without tomato sauce. Mom watches far too much telly, if you ask me. Plus she's useless at helping to find extra centimeters. The trouble with putting on your mom's high heels is if she sees you, she'll make you take them straight off. The trouble with wearing 2 pairs of shoes at once is the first pair keep falling off. The trouble with sellotaping books to the bottom of your shoes is the sellotape unsticks after about 6 steps, plus if the books belong to your mom, she gets a bit cross. Especially if she hasn't read them yet. Which means you still need to find another 6 centimeters from somewhere. In the end my mom convinced me I didn't need to find 6 centimeters from anywhere. She said I wasn't going to a theme park where the rides are massive, I was going to a traveling fun fair where the rides would be much smaller and not that death-defying at all. Which was a bit disappointing really, because I wanted all the rides at the fun fair to be as deathly death-defying as possible. Mom said if I wanted to do something deathly death-defying, then I should try tidying my bedroom. Which wasn't funny either. Then she said that there would be more than enough rides for me to go on at the fun fair, more than enough rides for Nanny and Grampy to waste their money on, and more than enough rides to make me feel sick. Which meant that 134 centimeters would be ample. And actually, she was right. For once. She isn't usually right about anything. She's usually always wrong. But I still put 3 pairs of socks on just in case. Chapter 7. When Nanny and Grampy arrived outside our house in their car, I nearly screamed. I was so excited. "Are you ready to win a goldfish, Daisy?" shouted Grampy as he opened the door of his car. "I sure am," I shouted back. "Are you ready to win a coconut?" he shouted as he opened the garden gate for Nanny. "You bet," I shouted back. If I could have, I would have run straight out of the front door, raced down the garden path and jumped straight into their car through the sunroof. I was so excited. Trouble is, Mom made me put some sun cream on first. The trouble with putting on sun cream is it takes ages. Especially if it's a hot day, because more of your burny bits are on show. Which meant Nanny and Grampy had to come into our house and wait for me. Which meant Mom had a chance to talk to them about some really boring stuff like, don't let Daisy get overexcited, and don't let Daisy go on rides that will make her sick. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if Mom was ever an actual child herself. If she was, I bet she never got sunburned. Mom made me put so much sun cream on, it was 12 before we even left the house. Grampy said I looked like a polar bear when I got in the car. That's the trouble with sun cream for children. Children don't want to put it on in the first place, plus when you're made to, it's all white and smeary. The trouble with short-sleeved t-shirts is the sleeves are too short to wipe your face on. The trouble with wiping your face on your arms is if your arms are white and smeary too, then the white from your face will smear onto your arms and the white from your arms will smear onto your face. Which means that, after loads of wiping, you still look like a polar bear. I mean, why can't sun cream for children be invisible? Why does it have to make them look like polar bears? I mean, grown-up sun cream isn't thick and white and smeary, is it? Sun cream for grown-ups is invisible. Which means it just makes grown-ups look like grown-ups. Only slimier. That's definitely something I'm going to invent when I'm older. Invisible non-smeary sun cream for children. An extra thick, extra white, extra smeary sun cream for grown-ups. So they can look like polar bears instead. Which will serve them right. Luckily Nanny had some tissues in her handbag. Otherwise I don't know what LD have done. Nanny had mints in her handbag too. Which made me feel even better. The trouble with mints is they're really hard to suck. Especially when you're driving to a fun fair. The trouble with driving to a fun fair is it makes your teeth get excited. The trouble with excited teeth is it's almost impossible to stop them from biting. Which is a bit of a problem really if your grampy suddenly says, no. Let's all play a game. Let's see who can suck a mint for the longest without crunching. At first I thought it was a really good idea for a game to play in the car. In fact, at first I did some really good sucks. Then I saw the funfair poster down by the roundabout. The trouble with seeing a funfair poster is your gums get excited too. Then I counted 3 more funfair posters in the high street. Which meant my tongue got excited. Then I saw someone carrying a balloon that I was absolutely sure must have come from the funfair. Which made my taste buds get excited. And then, as we got nearer and nearer to the park, I actually heard actual funfair sounds coming through the actual sunroof of our actual car. When I wound down my window, the sounds got even louder. Which meant my everything buds got excited. By the time we got to the car park and I got to actually see the funfair with my own eyes, even my dribble was excited. Which meant I had to crunch. Which meant I lost the game. Plus I bit my tongue. Which hurt a bit. But it was okay. Because for the first time ever in my life, it was funfar here I come. Chapter 8. The trouble with seeing an actual funfair right in front of you is you don't know where to look first. It was so bright and colorful and noisy and busy. There were colored lights and loud screaming sounds, there were big stripy tents held up by big thick ropes. Plus there were people and children everywhere. I was as though everyone in the whole wide world had come to have fun at the funfair. Except my mom. And guess what? You didn't even have to pay to get in. All we had to do was park our car in the field, walk across the grass and go straight inside. I didn't even have to be measured to see how high I was. It was so brilliant. And so confusing. My left leg wanted to go left, my right leg wanted to go right, and my head just wanted to go everywhere. Before I'd had time to even think about goldfish or coconuts, I ran straight over to a stall with a green and yellow stripy roof and a big red sign with gold letters that said Tombola. Tombola is a really exciting funfair game. Once you have paid a lady some money, you get to pick 3 chopped up straws out of a bucket of sawdust. All the straws have rolled up raffle tickets inside them, and if one of the raffle tickets has a number that ends in 0, you win a prize. I was really good at pulling the rolled up raffle tickets out of my straws, and even better at getting them to uncurl. Trouble is, the raffle tickets I picked out of the bucket ended in 3, 6, and 9. Which means I didn't win a prize. But it was okay, because there were loads of other stalls with flashing lights and stripy roofs to choose from. The next game I tried was called Hook-a-Duck. The trouble with Hook-a-Duck is you really need to be an expert fisherman to be good at it. Which is a shame for other children, because they haven't been taught to fish by my Uncle Clive. Luckily I have. Hook-a-Duck is one of the most skillful funfair games you can ever play. Once you have paid a man some money, he gives you a stick with a string and a magnet dangling from it. That's your hook-a-duck fishing rod. But then it gets even harder. Not only have you got to learn how to dangle the string and the magnet from the end of your rod, you have to lean over a great big tank full of actual water at the same time. And then it gets even harder. Because the tank of water is where all the ducks are floating. Not actual ducks. Yellow plastic ones. With magnets on their backs. And then it gets even harder. Because what you have to do then is use your hook-a-duck fishing rod to try and hook a duck out of the water. The trouble with a hook-a-duck duck is it can only get hooked out if you can get the magnet at the end of your string to stick to the magnet on its back. Which means you need to be a total fishing expert. Which I am. So I did. In about 7 seconds flat. When lifted my hook-a-duck duck out of the water, I thought I was going to be able to keep it as a prize. But the hook-a-duck man turned my hook-a-duck duck upside down and showed me a black cross that had been felt tipped onto its tummy. A black cross means you can't keep the duck. And you haven't won a prize either. Which was a bit of a shame, but it didn't really matter because I had already seen the next game I wanted to play. It was in a tent about 10 kangaroo jumps away, and it was a game LD always wanted to play, actual darts. To play actual darts you have to pay a lady some money and then she gives you 3 actual darts. The actual darts she gave me looked just like the ones you see on telly, only a bit fatter, with yellow plastic bits on the end. At first I thought the sharp bits might have been dipped in poison, but Nanny said you aren't allowed to have poison darts at a fun fair. The trouble with actual darts is it's a lot harder to play than it looks. Especially if you're only 134 centimeters tall. To win a prize at actual darts you have to throw all 3 darts at the dartboard and score less than 21. Which sounds easy, but is actually really hard. When I went up to throw my first dart, I could hardly see the dartboard, which meant when I let go of the dart it kind of didn't go in the dartboard at all. It went in the lady's shoulder. Luckily, it didn't have poison on it and it didn't stick in very far. Otherwise she wouldn't have let me have that go again. But she probably still would have got me a box to stand on. When you're playing actual darts and you've got a box to stand on, the dartboard is much easier to see. Trouble is, it doesn't make it much easier to hit. The trouble with fat darts with yellow bits is that when you throw them they never go straight. Plus, even when they hit the dartboard, they don't stick in. My first dart nearly hit the dartboard. My second dart nearly hit the dartboard. My third dart definitely hit the dartboard, but it still ended up on the ground. Which, if you add up all the scores, is 0. Which is definitely less than 21. When I asked the lady for my prize, she told me that if the dart doesn't stick in the dartboard it counts as 1,000. Which meant I'd scored 3,000. Which is slightly more than 21. When I asked if I could have another go, Nanny and Grampy said we should probably move on. So did the lady. Which was a good idea actually, because now I was about to go on my first ride. Chapter 9. When I saw the bumper cars, I nearly wet myself. Bumper cars are totally the best. Not only has the bumper car track got hundreds of flashing lights and really loud music, it's got cars you can actually drive. And crash. On purpose. Grampy said he loved going on bumper cars when he was a boy and he would come in my bumper car with me. I said I definitely wanted to be the driver. Trouble is, you can't just get in and drive a bumper car straight away. You have to wait around the edge until all the people in the cars finish their go first. When the hooter went and the bumper cars started to slow down, I had already worked out which one I wanted to drive. It was a bright shiny red one with a big gray rubber bumping bit round it. Plus it had my lucky number 8 on both sides. As soon as the cars came to a proper stop I raced straight across to car number 8 and waited for the boy inside it to get out. Trouble is, he was a bit slow undoing his seatbelt. The trouble with boys who are slow at undoing seatbelts is it makes you really impatient with them. The trouble with trying to undo their seatbelt for them is they don't really like it. Especially if they're about 15. When I grabbed the boy's seatbelt buckle, he got really huffy and pushed my hand away. I think he was nearly going to say something not very nice to me, but then he saw that Grampy wanted to get into the bumper car with me, so he didn't say anything at all. But even if he had, I wouldn't have cared, because now I was sitting behind the wheel of my very own bumper car. When I squeezed my fingers around my bumper car steering wheel, I got racing car tingles right through my body. When Grampy fastened my seal belt, I felt like a Grand Prix driver off the telly. At first we started off quite slowly, but after about 10 seconds I was driving our bumper car at full speed. If I turned the steering wheel to the left, we went to the left. If I turned the wheel to the right, we went to the right. And if a car stopped in front of me, I could press my speed pedal as hard as I could and crash right into the back of them. Without saying sorry. It was bump-tastic. Grampy asked me if LD'd been taking driving lessons from my mom. Then he told me to wave to Nanny. The trouble with waving to Nanny is if you're driving a bumper car at the same time, you might miss someone you should be crashing into. Luckily Grampy grabbed the steering wheel and made sure we bumped straight into car number 22. And then car number 7, car number 12 and car number 9. Grampy said we should try and crash into every single car before the hooter went. Trouble is, then the bumper car man jumped onto the back of our car and told us we weren't allowed to bump. Apparently we weren't in a bumper car, we were in a dodgem car. Which meant bumping wasn't allowed. We had to dodge instead. The trouble with dodging cars instead of bumping them is it's still really good fun, but crashing into people is much better. Grampy said it was health and safety gone mad, so we kept on doing it and doing it and doing it. Until I hit my chin on the steering wheel. Which wasn't my fault. It was car number 14's fault. The trouble with car number 14 is I don't think the driver can have heard the hooter. After the hooter goes, you're not meant to bump anyone anymore. So when car number 14 suddenly crashed into me from behind, I couldn't stop myself from crashing forward and hitting my chin. Because I wasn't expecting to be bumped. Luckily it wasn't my nose, because that really would have hurt. It still made me feel a little bit dizzy though. Grampy said that if you bump someone in a dodgem car, it makes them want to bump you back. Even after the hooter has hooted. Grampy undid my seatbelt, had a good look at my chin, gave it a rub and said that these things happen, especially when there are maniac drivers around. Which makes you think, doesn't it? Why don't bumper cars have airbags? Chapter 10. The trouble with being in a car accident is it makes you need a fizzy drink. The trouble with fizzy drinks is there are so many different ones to choose from. And non-fizzy ones. Especially at a fun fair. By the time I got to the fizzy drink stall, LD forgotten all about the bump on my chin. Fizzy drink stalls give children much more important things to think about. Like cola, or cherryade, or lemonade or orangeade, or, even better, wait for it. Slush puppies. When I saw that the fizzy drink stall did slush puppies, I really did scream. Slush puppies are my favoriteest drink that I'm not allowed to have. They're like milkshakes except they take all the milk out and put icy slush in instead. My mom never lets me have slush puppies because she says they're full of colorings and artificial flavorings and other things that sound really nice. But guess what? My mom wasn't with us. There are 4 flavors of slush puppy that you can choose from at a fun fair. Green, red, orange, and bright blue. Nanny and Grampy said I could have any flavor I wanted. So after they had given the lady some money, I asked for red. Mixed with bright blue. Which makes bright purple if you mix it up with a straw. Bright purple slush puppies are the best. You should try one. After LD finished my slush puppy, Nanny said we should think about getting something to eat. Which was a brilliant idea, because my slush puppy had made me feel really hungry. The trouble with funfair hot dogs and burgers is it's really hard to choose which one is nicest. Especially when the burgers are extra large and the sausages are extra long and bendy. So Nanny said I could have one of each. So I did. Without onions though. The trouble with funfair onions is they look a bit burned and squishy. Plus if you don't have any, it leaves much more room for tomato sauce. After I'd eaten my hot dog and burger, I thought I was absolutely full. But then I suddenly realized I wasn't. Because guess what I saw next? Candy floss. The trouble with candy floss is when you see somewhere that makes it makes you do two things. 1. Scream. 2. Scream again. Have you ever seen how candy floss is made? It's incredible. You just give a man some money and then he takes an empty stick and waves it round and round like a magic wand inside the special metal machine where all the candy floss is being fluffed up. The more waving he does, the more the candy floss fluffs up onto your stick. Nanny and Grampy asked the candy floss man for an extra large one, which meant by the time he had stopped fluffing, the candy floss on my stick was huge. In fact, it was bigger than my face. Luckily, I'm quite strong so I could hold it in one hand. When I took my first bite of candy floss, I couldn't believe it. It was like eating a pink sugary cloud. It tasted really sweet and really good for me, except every time I tried to chew it, it just melted away in my mouth. Big chews, little chews, tiny nibbles, weenie sucks, whichever way I tried to eat it, it just kept disappearing in my mouth. Even if I just touched it with my tongue, it melted away. After about 20 bites, Nanny showed me how to pull bits off with my fingers. If you pull candy floss off with your fingers, it doesn't melt away at all. Until you put it in your mouth. Then Nanny showed me how to use my candy floss to pretend I had a mustache like Grampy's. Only mine was a mustache I could eat. I've got a good idea, I said. I'll make a long candy floss beard as well and pretend I'm Father Christmas. Trouble is, I didn't have enough candy floss left on my stick by then. I only had about enough for a smallish mouse beard. Which was okay, because now we were going on the waltzer. Chapter 11. The trouble with waltzers is everybody wants to go on them. Which means we had to queue up in a line for about 5 minutes before we could get on. Grampy said the queue would give my slush puppy and hot dog and burger and tomato sauce and candy floss a chance to go down. Budit also gave me a chance to say hello to Sanjay Lepore. At first I didn't even realize that Sanjay and his mom and dad were standing in the queue behind us. I was far too busy watching the waltzer, trying to work out which carriage would be the fastest one for us to get into. Sanjay asked me if I'd seen any friends from school. He said loads of people from school were at the funfair too. He had seen Liam Chaldecott, Liberty Pierce, Barry Morley, Vicky Caro, Paula Potts and even Mrs. Peters. Can you believe it? Mrs. Peters! I never thought she would like funfairs too. Sanjay told me that, so far, he'd been on the merry-go-round and the octopus. Plus he nearly won a teddy on the Claw of Destiny. When I asked him what a Claw of Destiny was, he said it was a really exciting game in a glass box where you have to try and pick up a teddy by steering and dropping down a shiny metal claw. Sanjay's dad is a crane driver, so Sanjay knew he would be really good at the Claw of Destiny. Trouble is, the claw dropped into the teddies before it was supposed to and then it closed up before it was supposed to as well. Which meant that Sanjay touched a teddy but didn't actually pick it up. But he was really close. When I asked him what an octopus did, he said it was a really scary giant ride with 8 legs that spins you round and round in the air. Plus it waves you up and down so much it nearly throws you out of the fairground. When I asked him if it made him scream, he said he screamed so loud, his ears nearly fell off. When we got to the front of the queue for the waltzer, Nanny asked Sanjay's mom and dad if they wanted to get in our carriage with us. Waltzer carriages are easily big enough to fit 6 people in, so now it was going to be 6 times as much fun. Waltzers are really death-defying. In fact, they are so death-defying you don't get normal seat belts to save you, you get safety bars made out of actual metal. Which is a good job really because waltzers are out of control. Not only do they make you go faster than a rocket, they move you up and down as well. After about 27 seconds, we were all screaming so much we didn't even realize there was a steering wheel we could turn in the middle of our carriage. But when we noticed someone else doing it, we worked out how to make our carriage spin round too. At first, Sanjay and me took turns with the wheel, but then our face muscles started to hurt so much from all our laughing and screaming that we had to stop. Which was okay, because then Sanjay's dad did the wheel turning instead. You should have seen Nanny and Grampy's faces as we got spinnier and spinnier. Grampy's wrinkles went right over to one side of his face. And Nanny screamed so much, her false teeth nearly came out of her mouth. I think Nanny and Grampy were really relieved when the waltzer started to slow down. Sanjay and me weren't. We wanted to stay on and have another go. But we weren't allowed to. Which was okay, because as the safety bars in our waltzer unlocked, I saw another funfair game that I absolutely totally wanted to go on. It was a Wild West game called Rootin' Tootin' Shoot 'em. And guess what? It was a game with actual guns. Chapter 12. The trouble with actual guns is Sanjay's mom and dad don't think children should be allowed to play with them. So we had to say goodbye to Sanjay and his mom and dad after that. Which was okay, because 6 people aren't allowed to hold a Rootin' Tootin' cowboy rifle at the same time. Rootin' Tootin' Shoot 'em is one of the most dangerous things you can do at a funfair, because, and you're never going to believe this, it's a game with real actual rifles, loaded with real actual corks. Once Grampy had paid a man in a cowboy hat some money, I was given 5 actual corks to shoot, all of my very own. Plus I was allowed to stand up on a box so I could reach my gun. That's when I got to see what Grampy and me had to aim at. That's when I realized what a good shot I was going to have to be. Because our targets weren't Indians or buffaloes. They were boxes of dolly mixtures. The trouble with dolly mixtures is they're a lot smaller than Indians and buffaloes. Which makes them a lot harder to aim at. And hit. Grampy said to pretend I was Jesse James, but I don't think pop stars know anything about shooting dolly mixtures. So I just decided to aim as best I could. The trouble with Rootin' Tootin' rifles is they are quite heavy, which makes them hard to lift. The trouble with Rootin' Tootin' corks is they don't know how to aim properly. Every time the man in the cowboy hat loaded a cork for me, it came out of my rifle the wrong way when I shot it. If I aimed a cork at the middle of the dolly mixtures, it went over the dolly mixtures. If I aimed my cork over the dolly mixtures, it went under the dolly mixtures. If I pointed my cork to the left, it went to the right. And if I pointed my cork to the right, it went to the left. Even Grampy couldn't hit a box of dolly mixtures. And he had 5 corks too. Plus he was a soldier in the war. At least I think he was. On my last cork, I didn't even aim at the dolly mixtures. I just pointed it in the air and pulled the trigger. And guess what? I hit the dolly mixtures. I knocked an actual box of actual dolly mixtures right over with my actual cork. Trouble is, although I had knocked the dolly mixtures over, Than knocked them off the shelf. Which means the man in the cowboy hat told me I hadn't won a prize. Which wasn't okay. Because now I was starting to get a bit cross. Chapter 13. The trouble with getting a bit cross at a funfair is it makes you need a really big lolly with colored swirls on it. Which is lucky really, because guess what I saw when we left the Rootin' Tootin' Shoot 'em stall? Another stall that sold really big lollies with colored swirls on them. Nanny said that lollies with colored swirls on them were better than dolly mixtures any day, and after about 6 licks I decided she was right. After about 14 licks I decided I was going to try even harder to win a prize at the funfair. Then, about 3 licks later, I remembered exactly what prize I was going to win first. A goldfish. The trouble with going to win a goldfish is you need to know where to go. Grampy said he had been keeping an eye out for a stall where I could win a goldfish, but he hadn't seen one anywhere. I tried looking with 2 eyes and I couldn't see anywhere either. Nanny said that when she was my age, just about every stall at the fun fair gave you a goldfish in a bag as a prize. Which sounded a bit odd at first, but then Grampy told me the bag was made of plastic and filled with water so the fish could breathe. Which meant that if you won a goldfish in a bag at a fun fair, you could take it home and turn it into a pet. Which made me want to win one even more. Trouble is, there weren't any goldfish that I could win. There were loads of other prizes like teddies with wonky eyes, packs of cards with dragons on, squishy balls, bucket and spade sets and springy bags, little plastic guitars and blow-up bananas. But no alive goldfish in filled-up plastic bags. When Grampy asked a stallholder where all the goldfish were, the stallholder told us that goldfish prizes had been banned from fun fairs years ago. Apparently olden days children used to win goldfish, take them home, but not look after them properly. Which I can believe actually, because I had a pet goldfish of my own once called Freddy and my mum didn't look after him properly either. She let his water go all green. Mom said the water was my responsibility, but there was no way that it was. I only said I would look after Freddy. I never ever said I would look after his water. In the end, Mum gave Freddy to our neighbor, Mrs. Pike, to look after, because she had a pond in her garden with nice clean water in it. Which is a good job really, because if my mum had been left in charge of Freddy, I reckon she would have been arrested by the RSPCA. She might even have gone to prison for goldfish neglect. The trouble with Mum going to prison for goldfish neglect is she wouldn't be able to make my tea. Or take me to school. Or read me bedtime stories. So it's probably a good job we couldn't win a goldfish at the fun fair. And anyway, you'll never guess what I suddenly saw next. Actual popcorn. I'd never had actual popcorn before. The trouble with actual popcorn is there are 2 different flavors. Normal and toffee. The trouble with normal and toffee is I like them both the same. Nanny thought I might have been full after my slush puppy, hot dog, burger, tomato sauce, candy floss and swirly lolly, but I told her I definitely wasn't. So she let me have a big box of each. Trouble is, then I saw the helter-skelter. The trouble with helter-skelters is you're not allowed to go down them with a box of popcorn in each hand. I know because when I got to the top of the stairs, the helter-skelter man made me go all the way back down. Which was a bit tricky because there were loads of children coming up the other way. Nanny and Grampy said they would hold my popcorn for me and meet me at the bottom of the slide. Which was handy really because you need both your hands to go down a helter-skelter slide. One for holding onto your sack, and the other one for waving. Helter-skelters are one of the highest things you can do at a fun fair. When you get to the top of the slide, you can see all the rides and stalls down below you, from one corner of the fun fair right over to the other. And you can see all the people who are going bald. Before you go down the helter-skelter slide, you have to put your legs and bottom inside a sack. Then the helter-skelter man gives you a push, and off you go. I'd never been on a slide as whizzy as a helter-skelter slide before. Or a slide that was so curly and bendy. When I got to the bottom I thought I was going to shoot right off the end, but luckily my sack knew when to stop. Nanny and Grampy asked me if I wanted to go on again, and I nearly did, but then I noticed the hoopla. The trouble with the hoopla is it's one of the hardest throwing games in the world. It looks easy, but when you try it, it actually ends up being really hard. The way you play hoopla is you give a lady some money, and then she gives you 3 hoops. Then you have to aim your hoops at some 20-pound notes that are elastic banded to some boxes. Real actual 20-pound notes that you can actually win. At first I thought you had to throw your hoops over the money to win. But then Nanny told me that my hoop had to go over the money and the box underneath it as well. Not just any old over. Exactly over. The trouble with hoopla hoops is they have round sides and the boxes have square sides. Which meant my hoops wouldn't fit over the boxes. When I asked the hoopla lady for some square hoops, she said she didn't have any. Which meant I couldn't win with my first hoop. I couldn't win with my second hoop. And I couldn't win with my third hoop either. And neither could Nanny or Grampy. Which made me feel really, really cross. Grampy said he'd never won at hoopla in his entire life. Which makes you think, doesn't it? If people can't win at the games, why do the funfair people keep on doing them? After the hoopla, I was absolutely determined to win a prize. In fact, I was so determined and so cross, I decided I wasn't going to go on any other rides at all until I had won an actual prize on an actual game at the funfair. I wouldn't even go on the octopus until LD won a prize. I'm telling you, I was so determined and I was so cross. It made me need an ice cream. Chapter 14. The trouble with funfair ice creams is you have to pay more if you want flumps on them. And you have to pay even more if you want strawberry sauce as well. Marshmallow flumps are one of my favorite ice cream sprinkles, and strawberry sauce is one of my top squirty things in the world. So once Grampy had given the ice cream lady some money, I absolutely had to have both. And a flake. Nanny thought Slash must definitely be full after my slush puppy, hot dog, burger, tomato sauce, candy floss, swirly lolly, and 2 boxes of popcorn. But the good thing about popcorn is it's really light. So it means you'll always have room for ice cream, flumps, strawberry sauce, and a chocolate flake. Especially on a really hot day. The trouble with eating funfair ice creams on really hot days is you have to eat them really, really quickly. Otherwise your ice cream will melt, which means your flumps might fall off and your flake might come out. Plus your strawberry sauce might dribble down your cornet and go all over your hand. Luckily I'm an expert at eating ice creams really, really fast. Which is handy, because if I'd eaten my ice cream any slower, I would absolutely, totally never have been ready to go on, wait for it. Have you guessed it? The coconut shy. When Grampy told me he'd seen an actual coconut shy at the funfair, I nearly dropped my last bit of cornet. A coconut shy isn't a shy coconut, by the way, it's a game where you get to throw really hard balls. At first I couldn't see the coconut shy anywhere because there were too many people. Luckily Grampy is taller than me, so it was easy for him to point the way. The trouble with pointing the way is it still doesn't stop a funfair from being really crowded. But once we'd squeezed past a really, really long queue for the roller coaster and a much shorter queue for a ride called the Teacups, I saw the coconut shy with my very own eyes. Plus I saw the actual coconuts that Grampy said we were going to win. They were sitting on the top of some long sticks that the coconut shy man had banged into the grass. At the front, lots of people were lined up, throwing balls at the back of the tent. Every time they hit the back of the tent, the balls dropped down and landed on the grass. I can do that. I know I can do that. I said to Grampy. All I need is some balls. Once Grampy had paid the coconut shy man some money, I was given 5 balls of my very own. They were quite small balls, but they were made of hard, roundish wood, which meant they went a really long way when you threw them. After I'd thrown all 5 of my balls, I was absolutely sure LD won a prize, because every single one of my balls hit the back of the tent and every single one of them rolled down and fell onto the grass. Just like everybody else's. Trouble is, that isn't what you have to do to win a coconut. I thought it was, because that's what everyone else was doing. To win a coconut at a coconut shy, you actually have to knock an actual coconut off an actual stick. Which means you have to aim at the actual coconuts with your balls. Grampy said that was what everyone throwing the balls was trying to do. But it didn't look like it to me. Some people weren't even getting close. Now that I knew the rules of how to play, Nanny said I should have another go. So I did. Trouble is, I missed all 5 times again. The trouble with missing all 5 times again is it makes you start to get cross again. And it makes you need another go. Once Nanny had given the man some more money, Grampy stood behind me and told me how to aim. He told me to put 1 foot forward and 1 foot back, point at the coconut with my free hand, hold my wooden ball as far back as I could with my throwing hand, close one eye and blam it. So I did. But I missed again. Which made 11 balls I hadn't hit a coconut with. Which made me feel even crosser. So L aimed again. The trouble with aiming at a coconut when you're cross is it makes your eyes go googly, which means you miss by even more. Especially if when you let go of the ball, you growl as well. When Grampy heard me growl, I think he got a bit nervous, so he asked the coconut shy man if I could stand a bit nearer on my next throw. Which is totally fair because, if you ask me, the more balls you buy, the nearer to the coconuts you should be able to get. When the coconut shy man said I could step in front of the line to do my next throw, I was sure I would be able to hit a coconut. Except I didn't. I missed again. Or at least my ball did. Which made me the crossest I'd been all day. And the growliest. So Grampy asked if I could stand a bit nearer still. The trouble with standing a bit nearer still is the coconut shy man said I was standing too close now. Which I wasn't. But he said I was. So I had to step back a bit. Which put me off. Which meant that I missed with my 14th ball as well. And my 15th. Because I was still feeling a bit put off. Which made me want to punch all the coconuts and kick all the sticks over. And scream louder than any scream I'd done all day. But I didn't. Because Grampy said he'd win me a coconut instead. Chapter 15. Once Grampy had paid the coconut shy man some more money, I was sure he'd win me a coconut. But on his first throw he only hit the back of the tent. Grampy said he was just getting his eye in with his first shot, and that he was sure that he would hit a coconut with his second throw. Trouble is, he didn't. His second ball went right over the top of the coconuts. Grampy said that the second ball had slipped out of his hand by mistake and that his third ball had coconut written all over it. But I don't know who by. Then he told us to watch and learn. The trouble with watching and learning is sometimes you're not sure what to watch and learn. Because not only did Grampy miss again, he pulled a muscle in his shoulder. Nanny said it served him right for throwing the ball so hard. Trouble is, now that his shoulder was pulled, Grampy had to retire injured with 2 balls left to throw. The trouble with having 2 balls left to throw is you then have to decide who is going to throw them. I thought I should probably have the last 2 goes, because I had the most coconut ball throwing experience. But then Nanny said, why don't we throw one each? Which actually was a really good idea, because guess what? You're never going to believe this. Nanny actually hit an actual coconut with her very first actual throw. Honestly. She aimed her ball, did a little dance and then wham. She blammed a coconut first time. When Nanny's ball hit the coconut, I leaped right up into the air and did a little dance, because I was absolutely certain we had won a prize. The coconut she hit made a really good noise, like a wooden clonk. Then it wobbled. The only thing it didn't do was fall off the stick. Instead of falling off, it just stayed there. Grampy said Nanny should have thrown her ball harder, but Nanny said if she had, she would have pulled her shoulder too. I said if you hit a coconut you should win the coconut. Trouble is, the coconut shy man wouldn't change the rules. Which made me crosser and more furious than I've ever been in my whole life. Which is why I threw the last ball at him. The trouble with throwing a wooden ball at a coconut shy man is if it hits him on the head it could kill him. Luckily I only hit him on the leg. Actually, it wasn't even his leg. It was only his knee. I know it was his knee because it sounded like a coconut. Nanny and Grampy said they were really disappointed in me when I threw my last ball at the coconut shy man. In fact, they were so disappointed in me that they made me say sorry. But guess what? Even though I said sorry, the coconut shy man still banned me from having any more goes. Or from coming within 10 meters of his stall. Which meant now I was never going to win a coconut at the fun fair. Ever! And all because I'd hit a great big coconut shy man on the leg with a teensy wooden ball. Chapter 16. The trouble with realizing you're never going to be able to win a coconut ever in your whole life is it makes you growl even louder. Nanny said only grizzly bears were meant to do the kind of growls I was doing and that perhaps it would be better if I sat down on the grass for a while to calm down. The trouble with sitting down on the grass is it makes me want a toffee apple. Grampy said there were plenty more prizes we could still win at the fair, but if a toffee apple would stop me growling, it would probably be a good idea. A toffee apple is an apple dipped in really hard toffee. The toffee is really reddish and you have to bite right through it to get to the juicy apple bit inside. Nanny said she was amazed I still had room in my tummy for anything after my slush puppy, hot dog, burger, tomato sauce, candy floss, swirly lolly, 2 boxes of popcorn, ice cream, flumps, strawberry sauce and chocolate flake. But toffee apples aren't that filling at all. Because the biggest bit of a toffee apple is made of actual fruit. Plus some of it you can't even eat, like the apple core in the middle or the stick. Grampy said that once LD finished nibbling my toffee apple stick we should decide which prize we were going to try and win next. But just as I was putting my toffee apple stick in the bin, we bumped into Mrs. Peters. Mrs. Peters said if I kept trying my hardest she was absolutely sure I would win a prize at one of the fun fair games soon. And you'd think she should know, wouldn't you, because she's my teacher. Trouble is, she was wrong. The trouble with the clown bonk was the clowns kept disappearing before I could bonk them. The trouble with the test your strength stall was the hammer was too heavy for me to lift. The trouble with hotshot basketball was the hoop was too high for me to get the balls in. The trouble with Tin Can Alley was the bean bags I was aiming with went floppy every time I threw them. And the trouble with Roll a Penny was my pennies wouldn't roll straight at all. It was hopeless. The harder and harder tried, the more and more I didn't win. Which made me really, really, really cross. Luckily we found a stall that sold fudge. The brilliant thing about fudge is it comes in loads of different square-shaped flavors. At first I thought I was only allowed one type of flavor fudge in my bag, but the lady in front of us in the queue got 3 types put in hers. So I decided to have 6 flavors: caramel, vanilla, coconut ice, raspberry ripple, chocolate and mint. I was going to have rum and raisin too, but I decided not to in the end, because rum and raisin sounds like it's got beer in it. Plus I didn't want to be greedy. Grampy said I should think of every piece of fudge in my bag as a well-earned prize for trying so hard to win something. Which made me feel a lot better. Because when I looked in my bag I still had 8 prizes left. While I was eating a mint one, I thought about all the other lovely things that Nanny and Grampy had bought me at the fun fair that day: the slush puppy, hot dog, burger, tomato sauce, candy floss, swirly lolly, 2 boxes of popcorn, ice cream, flumps, strawberry sauce, chocolate flake and toffee apple. Then I realized that all those were just like prizes too. And I hadn't even had to win them. Nanny and Grampy had just given them to me. That's when I realized what a lucky person I was. By the time I'd eaten all my squares of fudge, I didn't care about winning actual prizes anymore at all. I just decided I was going to have as much fun at the fun fair with Nanny and Grampy as I possibly could before it was time to go home. And boy did we have fun. First, we went on the Big Dipper. Big dippers are the dippiest things you can do at a fun fair. Then we went on the Pirate Galleon. Pirate galleons are the scariest things you can do at a fun fair. I even saw Dylan doing massive screams. Then we went in the Hall of Mirrors. Halls of mirrors are the funniest looking things you can do at a fun fair. Then we went on the octopus. And believe me, Sanjay Lepore was right. All the rides at the fun fair were so much fun. Not just for me, but for all my school friends too. I saw Fiona Tucker waving to me on the merry-go-round. I saw David Alexander pretending to aim at me with the water squirters. Stephanie Breakspear got so dizzy on the vortex, she had to go and sit inside an actual St. John's ambulance till she felt right again. Nanny and Grampy said that they wouldn't mind a sit-down too. Not in an ambulance on a bench. The trouble with benches is they aren't very exciting. They don't zoom up or down or spin round and round or anything. They are free, but after about 2 seconds, they get really boring. So Nanny and Grampy said I could go for a little walk by myself. As long as I stayed where they could see me. That's when I met Jasmine Smart, Nishta Bhagwat, Colin Kettle, Barry Morley's big brother and 2 of his friends. That's when everything started to go a bit wrong. Chapter 17. The trouble with Jasmine Smart, Nishta Bhagwat, Colin Kettle, Barry Morley's big brother and 2 of his friends is they had all been to the fun fair the night before. And none of them had one on the coconuts either. Nishta had had 10 goes and missed every time. Jasmine had had 5 goes and got really close. Colin and Barry had had 20 goes each. Plus Barry had hit the same coconut 2 times in a row and both times the coconut hadn't fallen off. When I told them that the same thing had happened to me, Grampy and Nanny, no one was in the slightest bit surprised. Because do you know what Barry's big brother had told them? He told Barry, Nishta, Jasmine and Colin that the coconuts in the coconut shy at the fun fair will never ever fall off. Because they are stuck on with super strength coconut glue. And do you know what Barry's big brother's friends had told them as well? They had told them that the coconuts at the fun fair aren't just glued on, there are invisible force fields around all of them too. I'd only ever seen invisible force fields in space films before. I never knew you could get them around coconuts. But according to Barry's big brother's friends, the coconut shy man had a secret force field gadget in his trouser pocket. Which meant every time he saw you do a good throw he would make you miss by clicking the button and turning a force field on around the coconut you had aimed at. Colin Kettle said that knocking off a glued-on coconut would be a really hard thing to do. And Nishta said knocking off a glued-on coconut with a force field around it would be totally impossible. Which made me get really cross all over again. In fact, it made me get so cross, I wanted to scream and growl and stamp my feet all at the same time. Which is why I said I would help Barry, Colin, Nishta and Jasmine tell everyone at the whole fun fair what a Swizz coconut shies are. Which is why I said I would join them in a really big coconut shy protest. Which is why I said I would meet them at the big wheel at 4 o'clock. Which wasn't my fault. Chapter 18. The trouble with doing a protest is you're not really sure what a protest is going to be until you've actually done one. Barry said that his big brother had come up with a really good plan for a protest and that he and his friends were going to give us all the things we needed to make it the best funfair protest ever. All I had to do was be by the big wheel at 4 o'clock. The trouble with being by the big wheel at 4 o'clock is I was meant to be home by 4 o'clock. Which meant I had to persuade Nanny and Grampy to stay a little longer. When Nanny looked at her watch and saw it was 3:45, she said that we really ought to be heading back to the car. But when I told her that the big wheel was the only ride I hadn't had a chance to go on, Grampy persuaded her to stay. Nanny and Grampy said that they were feeling a bit tired and they would find another bench to sit on and wave to me as I went round. Which was good really, because I wasn't sure if they would want to join in our coconut shy protest. When I got to the big wheel, Barry's big brother and his friends were sitting on the grass smiling. Nishta, Jasmine, Colin and Barry were all waiting for me at the end of the queue. When I joined up with them, we all did a high five together and then Nishta gave me a big piece of paper to hide under my t-shirt. Barry told me it was my secret protest poster, but I wasn't allowed to take it out until I got the secret signal. Then Colin gave me something even more exciting. A tube of superglue. We've all got superglue. And we've all got posters, whispered Nishta. Then they told me the plan. The trouble with plans is they sound really good until they go wrong. The first bit of our plan went really well, because all we had to do was pay the big wheel man some money and wait for him to let us on. The third bit of our plan went really well too. It was the second bit that got us into trouble. As soon as the big wheel started to turn, Nishta pulled her poster out from under her t-shirt and held it above her head just like she said she would. "I'm a coconut," she shouted at the very top of her voice. Which was the secret signal for Barry. "I'm a coconut," he shouted, holding up his poster too. Which was the secret signal for Jasmine. And then Colin and then me. By the time all 5 of us had shouted, "I'm a coconut," we were right at the top of the big wheel. Which meant everyone in the funfair could see us. And hear us. Every time the big wheel went back down to the bottom, I waved as hard as I could to Nanny and Grampy. And every time the big wheel went back to the top, I shouted, "I'm a coconut," as loud as I could to everyone down below. It was brilliant. "I'm a coconut. I'm a coconut. I'm a coconut." Until the big wheel came to a stop. The trouble with big wheels stopping is everybody expects you to get off. Especially the big wheel man waiting at the bottom. Trouble is, getting off wasn't part of our plan. Staying on was. When the big wheel man asked Nishta to get out of her seat, she shook her head and held her protest poster high up above her head. Then she began to sing "We Shall Not Be Moved," which was a signal for us all to start singing too. When we all started to sing "We Shall Not Be Moved," Barry Morley's big brother and his friends started rolling all over the grass and laughing. The big wheel man didn't laugh, though. He got cross instead. Mostly I think because he had a long line of people queuing and he couldn't let them on unless we moved. "Off the wheel now," he said to Nishta. "I've got people waiting to get on." That's when Nishta told him that we had glued ourselves to our seats. The trouble with telling a big wheel man that you've glued yourself to your seat is at first he doesn't believe you. Especially at its 5 seats. Even nannies and grandpas don't believe you. But when you show them your empty superglue tubes and try to stand up, they change their mind. Then they call the fire brigade. The trouble with calling the fire brigade is it takes quite a long time for them to arrive. Which meant I was going to be even later getting home now. Which meant Nanny and Grampy had to call my mom and tell her what LD done as well. When the firemen arrived at the funfair and found out that we were coconuts glued to our seats, they told Nanny that they were going to have to cut a hole in my new orange shorts. And my pants. Which was a bit embarrassing really. Especially for Colin, because he didn't have any pants on. It took the firemen about 2 hours to cut Nishta, Barry, Jasmine, Colin and me out of our seats. And after that, the big wheel had to be closed for repairs. Which made the big wheel man go the same color as my slush puppy. When he threatened to sue Nishta's mom and dad for loss of earnings, Nanny and Grampy went a bit of a funny color too. Then they suggested we walk back to the car as quickly as we could. On the way, Grampy told me that we had been tricked into doing something very silly by Barry Morley's big brother and his big boy friends. That's why they were rolling all over the grass and laughing at us so much as we went round and round on the big wheel. Which made me start growling all over again. Nanny said that big boys can be really immature sometimes and that from now on it might be better if me and my friends ignored anything we ever heard big boys say. Especially big boy talk about coconuts, glue and invisible force fields. When we got near to the coconut shy, I realized that Nanny and Grampy were right. Because just as we walked past, I saw an actual coconut being knocked off an actual stick by an actual wooden ball. When the boy who had thrown the ball turned round, put his shirt over his head and started running around like a footballer who had scored a goal, I nearly screamed. Because do you know who it was? Do you know who had won an actual coconut at the fun fair, with one really good throw? It was Jack Beachwhistle. Of all the boys in all the fun fair, it had to be him. I was growling like a grizzly bear crossed with a dinosaur by the time I got back to the car. Chapter 19. I didn't get home till 20 to 7 this evening. Which isn't my bedtime, but for some unknown reason Mom has decided it is. Nanny and Grampy said they were pleased that I'd had such a lovely time, but it might be a while before they took me to a fun fair again. Mom said that gluing myself to a piece of funfair equipment was an extremely silly thing to do and that ruining my new orange shorts was disgraceful. She said the hole in my shorts was so big, she would have to throw them away. Which, if you ask me, means she is just too lazy to sew them up. Anyway, as a punishment, she said I would be going to bed without any grilled chicken, wild rice, and broccoli for supper. Which is okay actually. Because, to be honest, I am still a bit full from my slush puppy, hot dog, burger, tomato sauce, candy floss, swirly lolly, 2 boxes of popcorn, ice cream, flumps, strawberry sauce, chocolate flake, toffee apple, and mint, vanilla, coconut ice, raspberry ripple, chocolate and caramel fudges. Oh, and 2 of Nanny's mints. I had another one on the way home. Tee-hee. P.S. I bet you thought I was going to be sick.